Seriously, what another impressive week in college football we had. I am Johnny Talk Sports here to give you a really productive Week 9 college football recap, the playoff picture, and some Week 10 college football predictions. So we enter Week 9. We've got many teams still undefeated. We've got teams such as Alabama that's undefeated. Well, they were on a bye, so there's no way they're going to lose. Michigan playing a huge rivalry game, as is Clemson. Washington having a road test. Teams in the Big 12 like Baylor and West Virginia. Huge road games in their respective conferences. Boise State trying to keep hope alive for the group of five. They were having a huge road game against Wyoming. And there were some other big games. I mean, Nebraska also had one of those tough road games with the undefeated teams. Many suspected that this was going to be Nebraska's first real test of the year, based on their lack of schedule, based on their strength of schedule. So this was the first real game of Nebraska's season. So let's recap all the craziness from Week 9, because we had so much of it. This could easily end up being a 30-minute podcast today. But I'm going to try to avoid that. So here we go. West Virginia trying to keep hope alive for the Big 12, as is Baylor. West Virginia having a huge road game in Stillwater, a really tough place to play, especially in a Big 12 conference game. That is a really hard location to play at. As I did say, this was going to be a high-scoring game. However, Oklahoma State just made it look like it was just a one-sided game the whole time. I mean, it started off slow. Both teams had a field goal on their respective first drive of the game. But West Virginia just kept getting held to field goals. They're used to scoring touchdowns. If you want to beat a team like West Virginia, you got to hold them to field goals, and you got to take advantage when you're on offense. In Oklahoma State, they utilized all their offensive talent they had, led by Mason Rudolph. So now we have West Virginia as a one-loss team. Baylor having a tough game against Texas as well. I mean, Baylor looks like they can... Many think the Bears are going to easily win this game, but I did say that Texas was going to put up a fight in this game. However, Texas pulls off the upset, getting a game-winning field goal with under a minute left in the ball game. Could this put a dagger in the Big 12's chance of making the college football playoff? I'll explain that in a little bit. Because right now, I have my playoff picture set right now. But we're not done recapping Week 9. Let's just talk about something that stuck out to me. Louisville nearly losing to Virginia. Nearly losing to a 2-5 team Virginia. I mean, Lamar Jackson just connects with on a touchdown with 13 seconds left in that ball game. I mean, what really just turned the tide in that game was that missed field goal from Virginia to go up by 13. Because on that next drive, Louisville just came back and stormed for a touchdown. Then Louisville took the lead, but Virginia scored with a minute 57 left. And do they decide to play for overtime? Absolutely not. They decide to go for two, and they get it. So Virginia now leads 25-24 over number 5 Louisville. Louisville's playoff hopes are just in the hands of their Heisman contender Lamar Jackson. But Lamar Jackson is really clutch. I mean, converting on a key 4th and 3. As you think they were going to probably go into field goal range. Absolutely not. He tries to go deep, and he finds one of his receivers. 13 seconds left. See, as an A&M fan, that's kind of what I needed for them to have a chance. I needed Louisville to lose that game. Although Louisville's biggest game left is Houston. And Houston barely beat Central Florida. And they got smoked by SMU last week. Michigan had a convincing win against Michigan State. I did say it was going to be a 13-point victory, and it was a 13-point victory up until the end. I mean, Jabril Peppers is just something else. I mean, I did make my mock draft. I'll probably put it up, probably on Tuesday, most likely. I'll kind of explain it at the end. But Jabril Peppers, he's just something else. He will undoubtedly be a top 10 pick in this year's NFL draft. Where do we go next? In what was possibly the game of the week, Washington barely survives against Utah. I mean, Washington jumped out to a 14-0 lead in the first quarter, but then Utah kind of started to storm back. I mean, they ended up scoring 17 unanswered points. I mean, that's when Joe Williams kind of just got going. I did say that the offensive line for Utah would be a difference in the game, and it would have been. But the game-winning play was that punt return by Washington with 3.5 minutes to go. That put Washington in the lead, and that is what was the difference in the ball game. So Washington survives a tough one against Utah. Clemson versus Florida State. I mean, Florida State looked like they had it. I mean, until that Dalvin Cook run, and then there was a chop block. Jimbo Fisher was just extremely, extremely angry. I mean, he was just as angry as, I don't know. He was just really angry. I mean, he was just fuming. However, based on the way you look at it, this is really the third game that Clemson survived. I mean, they survived a tough one against Louisville. They survived against NC State. Now they survived against Florida State. So right now, Clemson is looking like that they are on their way to the playoff again this year. Ohio State only beating Northwestern by 4 points, 24-20, especially in the horseshoe. I mean, was there a little mental collapse after the Penn State heartbreaker? Maybe J.T. Barrett was held out of the end zone for the first time in his career. Let's see. This is going to really get some dislikes. Nebraska versus Wisconsin. I told you it'd be a really low-scoring game. I said it probably in the area of 17-14, and it really was for most of the game. I mean, the thing is, the Nebraska fans are just so angry. I'm about to sneeze. They were kind of blaming the referees on the Jordan Westerkamp, that there should have been a pass interference on Westerkamp in overtime on 3rd and 8. But the thing was, what really just bothers me about it is the fact that Nebraska fans, they're just acting like that's the sole reason why they lost the game. I mean, you couldn't take advantage of the 2 interceptions that Nate Gary had. And also, Tommy Armstrong threw 3 interceptions. So obviously, that's not the sole reason why they lost the game. I mean, I really respect the way that Nebraska played the game. I mean, they did a lot better than I thought. I'm giving credit to Nebraska right here, because going into Camp Randall, especially in the nighttime, that's really tough. Ohio State almost lost to Wisconsin. Michigan almost lost to Wisconsin. Wisconsin's a tough team, and I'm going to admit this right now, but the Big Ten is starting to be tougher than the SEC. In my 8th grade year, I said the Big Ten was going to be the most competitive conference within the next couple of years. Everybody laughed at me. They thought I was full of blank. But the Big Ten is starting to become the most competitive conference in all of college football. You've got Michigan, you've got Ohio State, you've got Nebraska now starting to evolve. You've got Wisconsin. You've got Penn State getting up there. Penn State may have had a 49-10 loss against Michigan way early in the year, But that's kind of acceptable now because Penn State is 20th in the polls right now, at least in the AP poll. Because in the SEC, you just got Alabama and you got Texas A&M. Florida kind of starting to evolve in there. Auburn starting to evolve in there, and LSU. I honestly think the Big Ten could easily beat some of these teams in the SEC. Like, I honestly think that, let's just say, for example, I honestly think Nebraska can beat Florida. I honestly think Nebraska could maybe, I think Nebraska maybe beat LSU. At least they'd have a strong chance to do that. But I can assure you that any team in the Big Ten can beat Washington. Because Washington doesn't have a defense to handle the Big Ten offenses. Because I don't think Washington has a defense to handle Michigan. Although I think it'd be a competitive game. But I just don't think Washington would come out on top. I mean, maybe I'll get proved wrong in the playoff. Maybe we'll see this matchup in the playoff, possibly national championship. Who knows? My nose is starting to itch, which probably means it's one of you people out there talking about me as recording this podcast. Anyway, let's finally get to the playoff picture. Now, in the unbeatens, we have, of course, Alabama, Michigan, Clemson, Washington. Nope, in that particular order, because Alabama is going to be number one on Tuesday when the polls come out. No question about it. Michigan, most likely number two, because I think Michigan has played a much stronger schedule than Clemson and Washington put together. Now, here's the one loss still in the hunt. Now, this is where things get interesting, at least if I was the sole man on the committee. I'm putting Ohio State at 5, because they had a 3-point loss on the road at Penn State. Because Penn State is on number 20. And I have Louisville at number 6, even though Louisville only lost by 2 points against Clemson. However, Clemson has looked a little weak this season. They almost lost to Auburn. I mean, they only beat Auburn by 6. They only beat Troy by 1 possession. It took overtime to get past NC State. Now, the committee is really serious about these margin of victories. I think they're going to be looking at that this year. Because this is one of those years that margin of victory is going to count. That's why you see teams running up the scores. At number 7, we got Texas A&M in the SEC. Now, I honestly think if it came down to Texas A&M, Nebraska, and Baylor, like let's just say it comes down to those 3 teams for the 4th spot, I think they would choose Texas A&M over Nebraska because they've played a much tougher schedule than Nebraska has. And unlike Florida, Texas A&M beat Tennessee. However, Florida is just looking like it's getting to Atlanta for the SEC title game. With Tennessee losing to South Carolina, that eliminates Tennessee from the playoff, the SEC championship. Basically, Florida is in the driver's seat. They control their own destiny. Right, I got Nebraska at 8. Because when the committee looks at this, if it came down to Nebraska and Florida, depending on how Nebraska is against Ohio State, they could end up choosing Nebraska as that 4th spot. Because this is where it really matters. All right, 10 Baylor, 11 West Virginia. Those are the bottom 2 of the 1-loss teams in the Big 12. They're both in the Big 12 conference. I mean, respectively, the Big 12 looks like it's going to be the team that the conference that is watching the cultural playoff from the televisions and the couches. Although, here's the 2 losses that are barely hanging on. You got the best 2-loss team, Wisconsin. Second best 2-loss team in Auburn. The third best 2-loss team, Oklahoma. And the 4th best 2-loss team, LSU. At least the 2 losses that still have a chance. LSU still has to play Alabama, Texas A&M, and Florida. And just think that they were almost not going to even play Florida and LSU because of the Hurricane Matthew. But now they have to. It's now impromptu. Because LSU has a really tough road ahead of them. But if they can conquer Alabama, they can conquer Florida, they can conquer Texas A&M, maybe they deserve a shot. And their only 2 losses are a 2-point loss to Wisconsin in Week 1 and a 5-point loss against Auburn, which led to the firing of Les Miles. However, there's much controversy, at least I think there would be, if I were to put Oklahoma as a better 2-loss team than LSU, because Oklahoma lost by 10 points against Houston, who's now unranked, and 21 points to Ohio State. I know there would be controversy if I was that one man that decided this. But Oklahoma's only ahead of LSU because Oklahoma's played more tougher teams so far than LSU has. LSU will get a chance against Alabama to prove how good they really are. So it's going to be really exciting to see. So that's my columns. Obviously, we're going to see some of these teams get eliminated this week. So basically, this is the 15 teams that are still alive, in my opinion. So let's get to the Week 10 predictions. Let's start off with the Thursday night game. I mean, this is kind of a game like I would describe as you're playing with fire if you're a gambler. UCLA versus Colorado. UCLA has lost several close games this year. They're kind of like the Tennessee, Nebraska of last year. They lose so many close games. And Colorado is surprisingly in the rankings this year. But I am going to pick Colorado to win this game. I just think that UCLA they're just gassed from this year. I mean, UCLA just had promise this year with Josh Rosen and that defense and their strong running game. I mean, they had potential. Everybody was so high on this team going into the season, but now it's just starting to crash and burn. So I like Colorado to win this one. All right, Navy versus Notre Dame. This could be another game you're playing with fire a little bit because Notre Dame is coming off a huge win against Miami in technically a rivalry game with the old Catholics versus the Convicts. And Navy coming off a heartbreaker against a really good South Florida team, really underrated team. I think this is, if you were a gambler, don't bet on this game necessarily because this is one where you're playing with fire. I had 2 games that were playing with fire last week, the TCU and Texas Tech and the Miami Notre Dame. I got one of them right, I got the other one wrong. And the one I got wrong was I picked Miami over Notre Dame. So I'm going to take a huge risk this week, and I'm going to pick Notre Dame. I think it's going to be a close game from start to finish. Remember, this game's at 10:30 a.m. on CBS. All right. Wisconsin going on the road against Northwestern. Northwestern put up a valiant effort against Ohio State last week on the road. But Wisconsin, are they a little too overly emotional about that overtime win against Nebraska last week? I think they will be for a little bit. I think Northwestern is going to push them to the limit. But I think in the end, I think Wisconsin will get it done in the fourth quarter behind the running game, just like last week against Nebraska. Right. Oklahoma State versus Kansas State. Interesting matchup in the Big 12. Oklahoma State coming off that huge 17-point upset victory against West Virginia. And Kansas State, a team that has had an up and down kind of year. Their defense looked good early in the year, but things have just been starting to slow down for Kansas State. But I'm going to pick Oklahoma State to win this game. I just think there's going to be too much offensive talent. Oklahoma State knows they're capable of. So I'm going to pick them to win. All right, TCU versus Baylor. Both these teams are trying to come off heartbreaking losses last week. But I just think Baylor feels like they know what to play for. They know what's at stake. They know that they still have a shot at getting to the College Football Playoff, but they do need some help. So I'm going to pick Baylor to win this game over TCU. I think it's going to be it's going to be a really close game than what people think. I don't think it's going to be some massive blowout. I think we're going to see a high offensive type of game. High 40s, high 50s. All right. Florida versus Arkansas. Now Arkansas, the last time we heard of Arkansas, they were humiliated 56-3 against Auburn. But now they're at home now, facing a top 10 Florida team. However, Arkansas can play a spoiler to Florida's playoff chances. And I think they will push them to the limit. I just think that after that bye week, they know they got to put that behind them. But I think it's going to still be in their minds. I think Florida's going to win this game, but it will not be 56-3. Arkansas will be competitive throughout the game, but I think Florida will win it in the second half. All right, a big matchup in the Big Ten, kind of maybe a trap game, if you will. Iowa versus Penn State. Iowa's they're an underrated team, but they've lost some close games. They lost to Northwestern. They've lost to North Dakota State in week 3. Heartbreaker in week 3, but I think Penn State's going to get this one done. I just think the home crowd of Penn State will be the difference in this game. However, Michigan still has to play Iowa on the road. Could that be a trap game come November 12th? All right, interesting match in the Pac-12. Washington versus California. Now, Washington seems to have an easy schedule to win out, but not necessarily. California is a great team. They know how to pull off upsets. They upset Texas early in the year when Texas was number 10, 11. So California is capable of pulling off upsets. They upset Utah in the year. California is a team of upsets. I'm going to pick Washington in this game, but if California wins this game, I will not be surprised. In fact, I'll root for California to win this game because I want some chaos in the college football playoff. Although I just think Jake Browning is going to be the difference in this game for his offense. He'll lead that team to a big road victory. However, it won't surprise me if that gets spoiled by California's Davis Webb. Right, the two big ones this week. Alabama going on the road, the number 1 team in the country, basically on their way to the national championship against LSU in Baton Rouge. Now, people would say that LSU is capable of winning the game, but that's what they said last year because they had Leonard Fournette. But what happened last year? Alabama's defense just stacked the box against him. They contained him the entire game. I believe Leonard Fournette only had one rush of more than 10 yards in that game. And I think Alabama's defense will do that again this year. I like Alabama to win this one huge. I'm aiming for about a 21-point victory out of Alabama. Right. The big one of the week, this is an elimination game for the college football playoff. Nebraska versus Ohio State. Now, this will most likely be a top 10 matchup unless the committee really, really does something stupid. Because both these teams are capable of being in the top 10. So this will be a top 10 matchup unless, again, the committee does something really, really stupid in the next 48 hours. I want to see Nebraska win, but I just think Ohio State's going to win that. I just think that Nebraska's defense will have a hard time stopping the mobile quarterback of J.T. Barrett. Although, I'm going to expect kind of a game that we saw out of last week against Wisconsin, a hard defensive scoring battle. But in the end, though, I think in the fourth quarter, I think that's when J.T. Barrett is going to really have a hard time being stopped. Because this could be the turning point in Ohio State's season. They lost by 3 points against Penn State in a heartbreaker. Special teams were an issue. And then last week, only a 4-point victory against Northwestern. They were struggling throughout that game. So I think the fourth quarter in this game against Nebraska will be the turning point in Ohio State's season. That is going to do it for your Week 10 college football predictions. That's going to do it for your podcast this week. We talked about Week 9 and how crazy it was. We did the Week 10 college football playoff picture going into this weekend and in the first rankings that will come out Tuesday night. Also made some Week 10 predictions. I'm trying to recover this week. I haven't had a good last couple of weeks. However, this is my favorite time of the year in college football where everything just starts going crazy. Just everything starts to break loose. So we're now down to 15 teams in this playoff picture, at least in my opinion. But how many will we have left by the end of the weekend? We will find out within the next couple of days. All right, well, that's going to do it. Like and subscribe to the channel. Follow my sports account at JB Talk Sports. Share the video with your friends. Get them to subscribe to me as well, as we just need 11 more subscribers for 500. The big 500. So if you know 11 people, get them to subscribe to this channel because it will mean a lot to get to the big 500. We're gonna have a Q&A video. Hopefully, if we get enough questions in this time around. So ask your question. It can be about anything. It can even be about sports. Sometimes it can be about whether it could be about personal life. It could be about my favorite movie and stuff, or favorite music or musicians or whatever. Anyway. Have a good day, everybody. I will see you next time. Have a good day, everyone.